If you've ever overindulged in alcohol, you probably woke up the next morning with a hangover. What's happening there is that your body is essentially detoxing from a physical toxin that you put into it. And so your symptoms are largely physical. But what happens when the toxicity is emotional? Well, we get the emotional hangover. So in this video, we're going to talk about what that is, what causes it, and 6 signs that you're experiencing an emotional hangover. And then I'm going to close with some tips on what you can do to help yourself recover. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Common Ego community. My name is Christina. On this channel, we talk about emotional abuse, spirituality, and self-development. Today, we're talking about the emotional hangover. And I'm going to bet that it's something that we have all experienced at one point or another. So what causes an emotional hangover? And the answer is going to vary by person. So for some people, especially introverts, you may experience an emotional hangover just from being overstimulated, from being in a large group of people and being expected to share your thoughts and opinions and interact. So prolonged periods of this can lead to an emotional hangover for many introverts. It can also be caused by a major argument or a conflict that you've had in your life, something that is very emotionally draining or upsetting to you. But an emotional hangover can also be caused by prolonged exposure to emotional distress. And it could be intermittent distress also. So if you've been in a toxic relationship, if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, if you grew up in an emotionally abusive environment, there's a good chance that you're experiencing some level of emotional hangover. And this usually occurs immediately after you remove yourself from that situation. And it can last weeks, months, even years. So the symptoms are going to vary from person to person. So your experience may not be exactly like someone else's, but there are definitely some common threads. I want to share with you 6 signs that you are experiencing an emotional hangover. And within those signs, you'll see some of the common symptoms. So the first sign that you're experiencing an emotional hangover is that you're just feeling overwhelmed and that you really just want to retreat. You want to go to your safe space. And you might not be feeling super comfortable around other people. Or even if you are feeling comfortable around other people, you may not feel comfortable sharing a lot of yourself with other people. Another sign that you're experiencing an emotional hangover is that you're feeling very vulnerable. You're feeling almost like you have physical wounds that are exposed and could get reactivated very easily. So you have this feeling like you need to protect yourself. In addition to that, you may feel like these wounds are obvious, like everyone can see them. The third sign that you may be experiencing an emotional hangover is that you just feel emotionally fried. You feel like your emotions are just kind of like zapped. And this can lead to feelings of apathy. And it can also lead to kind of a roller coaster of emotions. Seemingly out of nowhere, you may be experiencing intense emotions that tend to fluctuate. You may go from intense sadness to rage to intense anger very quickly. So quickly that it's probably alarming even to you. And what I'm talking about here is a change from your baseline. So not everyone who experiences intense emotions or has intense fluctuations is dealing with an emotional hangover. But if you've recently experienced an intense emotional event and this seems to be coming up for you, it may be an emotional hangover. Another thing that you might be feeling if you're experiencing an emotional hangover is shame. You may be ashamed of the things that you put up with when you were in this emotionally abusive relationship. And you may be feeling shame for how you're feeling now, for how you're handling it. And this is because we don't often give ourselves the same grace that we give other people. So if you were to listen to somebody else's story, and if you were to listen to everything that you have been through, if you were to listen to somebody else tell that story, you'd probably understand why they might be a little bit emotional, or maybe just things are just a little bit more difficult to handle. It would probably make sense if someone else was telling you this. But when these things happen to to us, it's difficult to see it from that perspective. It's difficult to have that level of grace. So this may lead you to mistakenly come to the conclusion that you're somehow weak, that somehow you just can't handle this. But you would be wrong. We are not robots. We do have emotions, and sometimes we need a little time to detox from whatever toxicity is coming our way. If it's over imbibing in alcohol, you might need a day for your body to recover. Or if you've been in a toxic relationship, you're going to need some time and maybe even some help to get back to a place where you feel good again, where you feel like yourself again. So the fifth sign that you may be experiencing an emotional hangover is that you're having these visceral reactions to other people that kind of seem to come out of nowhere. And this often manifests as defensiveness. And this kind of makes sense because if you're feeling like you have these exposed wounds and you're feeling like everyone can see them, you might get the feeling like you need to protect yourself. And so that may be a visceral reaction. You may feel a little bit more defensive than usual. And while we are always responsible for our actions and reactions to other people, we can do so with patience and understanding for ourselves. So the sixth sign that you're experiencing an emotional hangover is that you may start feeling like you're addicted to this person or to the toxicity. And this often happens where if you've been exposed to toxic relationships, if you've been exposed to narcissists all your life, you may feel like somebody who's emotionally healthy is just boring. And it's interesting because something similar kind of happens with drug addiction. The brain gets so used to the overexcitement of the drug that it gets wired to seek that drug because everything else just isn't good enough. It just isn't enough. And so when it comes to toxic people and toxic relationships, I think many of us kind of follow the same pattern where it feels like something's missing if it doesn't have that intensity. Because these kinds of relationships, they do come with such intensity. And you can grow to associate that with love and that with what's supposed to be there. So in the absence of that, in the absence of that intensity, the drama, the push and pull, the back and forth, in the absence of all of that, it feels empty. Okay, so if you're in this place, how can you help yourself heal? How can you expedite this healing process? And I have 3 tips for you today. So the first that I've already kind of mentioned this before, but it's really important. Be kind to yourself. Understand that you've been through a lot and your emotions do need time to regulate. You do need time to heal before you can get back out there. So the second tip I have for you is kind of a fun one. And this one is to jumpstart your joy. And this is about doing something that will instantly make you feel good. And these are good things to do whenever you're feeling especially down, whenever you're feeling like you might want to reach out to the person who was toxic in your life or get back into another toxic situation. So these clearly aren't long-term cures, but by jumpstarting your joy, you can help get yourself to a point where you can feel comfortable, you can feel good again. Jumpstarting your joy can give you hope. And hope is one of the most important things that we can have. And it is so easy to lose in the aftermath of a toxic relationship. So some ideas: put on a song or a playlist that makes you feel good. And you could also exercise. Now, I know for some people, exercise seems like a chore, but exercise does help release some of those feel-good chemicals in your brain. And while you may feel like you're struggling to get through your workout, when you're done, there's a good chance you're gonna feel a lot better. And another thing you can do when you feel like nothing else is working is just, if you can, just take a nap. Hit the reset button, and when you wake up, you can start fresh. And the final tip I have for you is to start looking at this moment as a turning point. So this is the point in your story where things start to turn around. This is your comeback moment. So take it. Own it and do whatever it takes for you to get back on your feet. Now, that may involve talking to a therapist, and it may involve healing some of those deep inner wounds that you've been carrying around. It may involve a lot of education about what you've been through and where you want to go. Really take some time to evaluate what this healing journey looks like for you and get started, because this is your comeback moment. So I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, please go ahead and hit that like button. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, be sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you next week.